quick tech check, make sure everything looks and sounds good. If you can't hear me, if there's some issue, please go ahead and refresh, contact SEMG support, or put something in the chat, and we have some moderators in there that could try to get it solved for you. Yeah, so also speaking of the chat, remember to always please be respectful. Everybody has been, but just good to put out there, and that the Q&A again will happen at the end, like it has for our previous talks. So more for newcomers, but if you've been here, thank you for staying. If you are new, thank you for joining. So we just heard from Dale on organic strategies for zero-click SEO and for all that he spoke about, and that was great. Thank you so much, Dale. We're really on a roll here with very, very informative webinars, as we have all been mentioning in the chat. So yeah, now we're going to be turning towards how to prepare for LLM-powered search and seeing how ready and your preparedness in general is. So please welcome Nick Samuel, Head of Technical SEO at Dentsu, and he's going to introduce a practical readiness audit that you can actually use. So as always, share any takeaways with hashtag SEO Square, and stay tuned for the rest of our webinars. And yeah, so thank you, Nick. The stage is yours.
That's great. Thank you so much for the introduction, Quinn. Good afternoon, everyone. I think it is 12, or at least after lunchtime. Maybe everyone's in the morning. Who's joined this call so far, because we're US based. Yeah, just to say today, I'm really excited to be here to talk about how to build an LLM readiness audit and a practical framework. I think one of the biggest challenges we've kind of got from as an agency such as Dentsu is just how to prepare for the future of search. I know very much as our job is to evolve and adapt our sort of SEO product offering, but it's very much a sort of existential question that we've been tasked with. A lot of our strategy talks at the start of January were around sort of how we can kind of best prepare our clients. And this talk is pretty much a culmination of our sort of thoughts so far on that topic. By no means it's definitive, because there's lots of change in the industry, lots of new news every week. But this is our kind of collective thinking so far on the challenge of the new era of search and how we're approaching it. Without further ado, I can go through it. So just a quick introduction to myself. So my name's Nick. I'm a UK-based tech SEO. I'm head of technical SEO at Dentsu UK. I'm currently in Colombia on holiday, a bit of a mistimed holiday, you might say. I do want to turn down the opportunity to speak at this fantastic event, so I thought I'd better do so. But I'm visiting my wife's family, and we're currently in the coffee region, sort of southwest of Colombia. So nothing really to say there. I'm not trying to make you guys jealous, but just a reminder that if you do want a cup of coffee, go and get one now. We'll start with this talk. Last thing just to say about the intro is that I don't consider myself an AI expert. I think there's a lot of academical sort of information out there on AI, LMMs, a lot of stuff that's very technical, very computer science focused. But hopefully this is a bit of a bridge between sort of not layman's terms, because it's kind of tech, but a kind of a real accessible guide to kind of the practical tips you can take to improve sort of visibility and LLM search as we enter this new era of SEO. So in terms of what we're going to cover, so we've talked about the new era, the context. I've joined a few of these calls sort of in this conference prior, so I think there's a lot of fantastic context on the new era of search, so I won't try and dwell on this too much. It's about the challenge, frame it with some kind of key stats. Hopefully you guys can use these and take them away. And then we'll talk about the response from Dentsu around LLM readiness audit. So the kind of the tool that we built, the Google Sheet that we'll share with you guys afterwards, so you'll get your hands on that and view it. And then we'll talk about some practical tips as part of that, and then just a quick summary at the end. Hopefully that sounds good. So first of all, the new era of search. We kind of summarize it with like this one single quote, pretty much. And this is kind of the start of our product narrative for tech SEO. So the idea is that we're into new era of search. It's powered by AI and LLMs, and it's underlined by a diversification of search engines and sort of a change in how users or user behavior, essentially, how they kind of expect SERPs to look, and how they expect sort of search engines to write that information. That's kind of a real key theme throughout all of this here. In terms of what is an LLM specifically, as I said, I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to bore you with a big definition, but I think in case you guys haven't realized just yet, they are a pretty big deal in the simplest possible terms. I think when they initially came out, there's that kind of suggestion that maybe they were just a kind of a parrot or a mimicry type machine, or arguably maybe there was like a fancy sort of autocorrect. But I think that's kind of a bit of an understatement, a bit of a disservice to the technology here at play. I think the main thing really is that obviously there is that kind of predictive element to it. It's based on inputs and outputs. These are mostly summarize and provide textual information and answers to it. The idea really is that they do continuously learn. They continuously need new sources of information. And also the main point really is just that they're getting better and better. So whilst sort of the early versions of ChatGPT might have been somewhat limited, they're getting more and more sophisticated, which is presenting more challenges for search overall. If we compare the sort of the main behavior here for search, so we're all kind of familiar with that verb of, I Googled it. We probably all say that ourselves as SEOs. We probably say that on a daily basis, hourly basis in some cases. But in actual fact, ChatGPT has established itself as its own sort of verb as itself, if you will. So maybe not a verb's the wrong word if you're getting technical in English terms, but there's definitely that kind of personification of LLMs that's happened. So, I asked Google, and now people say I've asked ChatGPT. That's pretty much it. You ask ChatGPT for an answer. I think the main sort of call out here, sometimes there's sort of 5 breakdown of 5 points of it, but for SERPs, traditionally we used to get a selection of answers, and then we'd be presented with that, the sort of 10 classic blue links. We'd click one, and then we get the answer, and we kind of like surf around, like the idea of surfing the web. We'd visit multiple pages to kind of get that information as part of the user journey. That's pretty much changed now in the sense that the neuro search answers are obviously aggregated. And when it comes to that, the idea is that they're also going to be multimodal. So there's going to be multiple technologies at play. We've already seen this like for a long time now, so it's not exactly a new trend overall. But essentially, let me just go to the next slide. We're saying that Google is still dominating the landscape overall, but there's increased competition. Essentially, increased competition means that there's new opportunities and new search engines that we need to optimize for. Now, traditionally, when we said SEO, especially in sort of I call it the Western dominated world, because obviously there is obviously search engines across the world, different countries or different regions do have them, Yandex, Baidu, Naver, etc. But really, like when we say SEO, we are a little bit lazy because we do refer basically to Google search engine optimization. I think most people here, whether they admit it or not, probably do focus or spend the majority of their time on Google, optimizing for Google more specifically. Now, it's still probably going to be the case because the market share of Google with Gemini and obviously the AI mode is still very much high. It is like massively higher compared to ChatGPT currently. But ultimately, if ChatGPT does continue to gain traction, as do other search engines, that means there's a different landscape which we need to optimize for. And as I said, that this is kind of the current breakdown of ChatGPT. So it's the most popular sort of LLM search or AI generated one overall, 86% market share as of last year. There's a little bit of fluctuation. So Gemini is sort of split out into its own category, so it's number 2 at 9%. But overall, like with Google obviously including parts of Gemini in the AI overview and AI mode, like the real sort of share, I guess, of Gemini or of Google's sort of AI LLMs powered search is much higher overall. But it's just a breakdown of the competition with Google so far. When it comes to the new era of search as well, I mean, there's 2 significant trends that we're all probably well aware of, if not a little bit sick to death of seeing. So the idea, as you see in search engine land, is that there's going to be 3 billion more LLM visits in the top 5 platforms in the next few years, essentially. And then equally, we have Gartner here who predicts that's going to result in a 25% loss in search traffic by 2026. There's been quite a lot of traction in the last couple of weeks, or last week or so, on LinkedIn, this idea or the theory of the great decoupling. The idea is that impressions arguably will go up, whereas clicks will decrease. I think Martin Schmidt basically sort of theorized that the idea is that you might get less traffic ultimately. These people who do visit your website might convert better. So it's kind of like a bit of a trade-off in terms of like volume of traffic versus quality. But overall, it's going to have big implications for sort of our clients and our businesses. For the ultimate sort of doomsday clickbait headline for SEOs, I have to say, which is a bit of a kind of funny one to say. I feel like this is definitely a bit of a digital PR or maybe classic link building exercise, but it's also from Gartner, and they came out with this sort of alarming statistic saying that by 2028, brands' organic search will decrease by 50% or more as consumers embrace these new technologies. Again, I feel like a lot of these stats are a little bit kind of not pie in the sky. They are very much predictive of what's going to happen in the future of search, but it's hard to kind of hang your hat on it with certainty that these numbers are going to happen. But one thing that is for sure is that these are the trends that we've observed for a long time. We've seen a decrease in clicks overall, probably for the last 10 years. Google incorporates more website information into search features, and this is basically an evolution of that trend overall. So the challenge, I mean, this is hopefully a little bit obvious. The challenge does sound familiar, right? We're here to optimize. We're here to kind of not stagnate our best practice recommendations. We're here to constantly improve. The kind of idea of SEO, we've always been central to SEO, the idea of do or sort of adapt or die. We're much in that sort of evolution mode. But in some respects, like it is a little bit generic in terms of what we're sort of doing with AI. I mean, this kind of like phrase here is it could be applicable to almost any year or any update. So the idea is that depending on the latest change, we need to adapt our strategy for 2025. It could be 2024, it could be 2026. If there's new best practices, we need to align with them. If there's an algo update for Google, we need to kind of adapt what we're doing as well for our consultancy. And then if there's a new sort of search feature or piece of technology, you obviously need to adapt for that as well. So I feel like the proposition does sound quite simple. Like, yes, with AI, there's no AI mode, AI overviews, we take that content. But there is that kind of argument from a lot of thought leaders that perhaps we are kind of oversimplifying it a little bit. So Mike King is obviously one of the most sort of forefront thought leaders on this. So he's got a very thought-provoking piece on SEO, to the future of SEO, specific AI mode and how it works. And I think the main quote I took away from this, and I don't want to kind of do a disservice to Mike King, because there's a lot of context in his article here, and I don't want to kind of underplay it. I definitely recommend you guys read it. But the thing that starts to me from this sort of quote that I've got is that right now there's a high overlap between organic SERPs and AI overviews. There is that kind of that fertile territory where there's a significant overlap, that sort of Venn diagram of traditional SEO and then sort of the future-proofing AI, which is kind of where this tool kind of sits at the moment. We're kind of one foot in the old world, one foot in the new world. We're not fully there just yet. But what Mike does posit, or what he essentially says, is that he feels like we're not ready for what happens next. And there's a lot of stuff that is happening, at different sort of milestones that we can talk about. In terms of milestones, I think are relevant in terms of putting that right on the wall for traditional SEO. I think there's a few different ones. Apologies if some of these are a little bit hard to see with the contrast, but I'll try and read them out for you. So the first one really is AI mode launch in US. So we've seen that happen. It was for logged in users originally. Now it's rolled out completely. So you can click that tab and get it. The second sort of milestone that we envision at Dentsu is that the AI mode will launch globally. Like, it follows the pattern of Google's releases in the future. It's going to happen sooner or later. It'll be available across all territories sooner or later, for sure. The third thing really is that Google is going to eventually copy ChatGPT. By copy, we mean they're going to merge basically AI mode with sort of traditional search features. So the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, basically said the same thing. He said that the future is going to be that kind of integrated singular search interface that has that kind of ChatGPT conversational qualities to it, whilst also obviously achieving innovation in the web and ServerNet. The next two scenarios are a little bit sort of different overall, I'd say. So we're talking about agentic AI capabilities, which right now is a little bit of a buzzword, to be fair. But the future, the idea is that machines basically rule the web. Like, you can ask an agent to buy a product for you without ever visiting the website. Again, we're not fully there yet in this world, but it is sort of rapidly coming. I think that when that comes, along with Google sort of integrating sort of ChatGPT's like interface, they're kind of like a real kind of shift in the sand in terms of where we're at with the new era of SEO. And obviously in the future as well, we're talking about the idea of kind of full-on sort of sci-fi search where perhaps not even using laptops, phones, tablets, computers. It could be AR, augmented reality, it could be various devices, could be audio-based, could be a whole number of sort of scary AI scenarios. But for now, I think these are the main milestones I consider as we talk about the strategy for traditional SEO at the moment. So the key questions really for this in terms of what we can do. So there's that kind of philosophical side to it. First of all, that kind of inward looking. I mean, how do you even define an SEO era? Is it an algorithm update? Is it a shift towards technologies? And then you have that kind of other idea from a philosophical point of view, if you will, is what is SEO anyway? We're always sort of been seen as that kind of pygmy type thing where we kind of do a little bit of everything. And I think that kind of continue in the future. Like, we have our kind of a broad remit across many different disciplines. I think that Mike King's idea is that we have the scaffolding, we support different functionalities across the business and technology departments. But it is a real good question in terms of like, if machines can sort of crawl websites, synthesize information without us necessarily doing them, like, will SEO still exist? Which kind of brings us back to the old classic SEO is dead or SEO is dying. I don't think that is the case, but it's definitely changing, and that's what we need to be aware of. So from a practical term, the idea is like, how long does it take to end this era? And then sort of the central theme of this talk, like, what can we really do right now to prepare for the future? And I mean, this is kind of a little bit cliched as well, I suppose, but the idea is that you can have a challenge, or you can kind of change your mindset and view it as an opportunity. And I think very much here is an opportunity. That's the way we try and approach it for our clients. Search evolution means more competition, and more competition arguably means, more opportunities. So whereas before we optimized for, largely for Google, occasionally some international search engines as well, perhaps a small amount of time devoted to Bing. And now there's like 5 or 6 search engines that we can really optimize for. Before it was about ranking #1 in Google, whereas now it's about getting featured across answers, across a number of different search engines. And that's kind of the challenge we've got: new audits and new ways of working. So in terms of building an LLM readiness audit, which is the main point of this talk, we've basically created this audit to act as a kind of proactive strategic sort of playbook, if you will, of recommendations you can do. So the idea is to combine sort of, I guess, strategic or sort of work streams, however you want to call that, perhaps it ties in with existing SEO roadmaps, then combine with a few sort of smaller scale actual insights in terms of how you can do or take specific actions to prepare for the AI LMM era in SEO. So this is our kind of thinking on it so far. So at the moment, there's 5 pillars that we've got. The idea is that there's analytics and measurement, crawling and indexation, UX rendering, technical discovery, which is kind of like platforms and stuff that kind of spans a little bit of tech, a little bit of other channels. And then we have content authority as well. So the idea is content, digital PR, and sort of backlinks and how you can kind of prove that authority. When it comes to writing the scorecard as well, so we'll be sharing a copy of this this Google Sheet afterwards. But the idea is essentially that you take these different areas, you basically fill in this readiness scorecard, and then you'll be given a diagram like this, like a radar diagram. It kind of gives you an average score in terms of how prepared you are for the new era of search. Now, there's obviously a few caveats here in terms of like you can't just do all this stuff and be fully prepared because it's dynamic. There's different algorithms at play in terms of how content is surfaced, but we feel like a lot of these actions are very relevant to our clients. Sort of, as I said, one foot in the old world, one foot in the new world, and this is the kind of checklist that we've got so far and what we'll talk about. So by default, when we put this together as a team, so it's a real collaborative effort at Dentsu. Each specialist team contributed their ideas and we kind of brought them together. Not like a LMM would, but kind of we've synthesized them all together, put it together. By default, our kind of report has a 20% weighting for each category, but depending on your kind of your website, your client, or your ways of working, you might want to tweak these up overall. So 20% default weighting, but you can see how if you feel like content is more important for your niche, you can upweight that from the spreadsheet, and then you have a little bit of a better understanding of how that works overall. And then this is just a quick insight into what some of the checks, example weighting with technical discovery. So the first item here, which is pretty controversial, which is LMMs.txt. I say controversial just because it's a kind of a newly proposed web standard, but it's not one that's actually adopted by search engines just yet. I think this is a point that John Mueller was quick to point out on, I think it's Blue Sky earlier last week, about the fact that you can create it, but will it be super important right now for LMM search? The answer is arguably not. But if you look at it from a readiness perspective, arguably if you can set this up quickly, it might be a good initiative to undertake. So we have given that a max score of 1 overall, whereas you feel like some of the Index Now protocol, aligning with shopping feeds and working with local business profiles to get consistency, there's stuff that's been upweighted a little bit heavier and they carry a little bit more significance for the readiness optimization checks. So as I said, it's very much like a V1 proof of concept. Like we're evolving this, new information emerges. I think every week there's lots of really awesome newsletters with new stories and new updates that are happening. This is kind of what we've seen so far overall. In terms of our process and how we approach the sort of LMM optimization, we've kind of got 3 parts to it so far. So this talk is more so about the LMM readiness audience, so the second part. But the first part really is understanding brand visibility and perception analysis. So the idea of interrogating or asking ChatGPT, asking Gemini, asking other search engines like what they think of our brands, what they think of our websites. And there's a lot of information you can get just by asking simple questions there. But as I said, this is one part of it, and we'll go through that in a minute. So shifting to the practical tips for LMM readiness, this is kind of the list of checks we've got. We start with analytics and measurement. So each of these from the scorecard has been given a classic impact and effort scoring, to give you an example, and then we go through the weighting overall. So we've identified 5 things we feel like we can do to prepare for LMMs so far. We'll start with number 1, we go through them. So first of all, LMM tracking LMM traffic and revenue. So obviously, what gets measured gets influenced. So the idea here is that if you track revenue and sort of clicks from LMMs, then you can start reporting it, understanding it. For most of our clients so far, LMM traffic is a drop in the ocean. Like it's not much. So if you were to compare LMM referrals or traffic from sources compared to organic, like it is in the minority, and the graph would look really, really skewed. So it wouldn't really be fair to compare them side by side. But if you isolate the traffic out, then you can really see the kind of growth that's happened in the last 6 to 12 months, pretty much. And there's a pattern that we've seen across most of our clients. In terms of how you can do this and the actionable tip, the simplest thing is a regex filter. So once you've got that, there's a link to the article from Search Engine Land there. There's basically a regex filter you can get. You can either apply that to GA to create a custom channel group, or you can take that and connect it to a Looker Studio report, and then basically build that out and start sharing that with your sort of key stakeholders. So this is an example of a traffic dashboard that we built for Dentsu. It's been really well received with clients. Very simple, but it starts building that kind of narrative, that argument that needs to be invested in and monitoring more in LMM, SEO, or GEO, however you want to define that. The second readiness action is to measure brand share of voice, to understand brand perception AI search. At Dentsu, we built a custom tool called Debut, which kind of you can put in different marketing profiles, different scenarios, different brands, and ask it information and basically say what attributes you associate with the brand. Perception is like one of the biggest challenges we feel like with this new era of search. Whereas before, when Google would return answers, usually based on stuff like title tags, meta descriptions, on-page content, it's kind of black and white, that kind of inputs, outputs. Now, Google would obviously rewrite title tags quite often. I think 60% of searches was the figure that comes to mind. Reality in the era of search, as I said, they synthesize that information and sort of return an answer. It's about kind of how LMMs and machines essentially perceive your website and perceive your brand. So tracking and understanding that is a kind of a really important part of it overall, and it's kind of definitely an action you can undertake there. The link at the bottom there is to Authoritas, which has a kind of a cool article comparing these different tools. Definitely worth checking out and seeing ones which make sense. The third one, which I've taken from sort of one of our partners here, DemandSphere. So the idea is that you can track AI overviews in AI mode. Now, I'm not saying that you need to track every possible query, because it's kind of sort of falls back into that old debate around rank tracking itself. Is it useful? Is it not useful? I think that tracking a few sort of key core terms or key questions is definitely useful. And I guess the readiness action here is to speak to your current rank tracking providers and understand what capabilities they have overall, whether or not you can do them. So we changed rank tracking providers ourselves towards the end of last year. We moved to DemandSphere just because we felt that they were kind of putting AI and LMM search at the forefront of their proposition. And so far, we're allowing it to track certain responses. Now, obviously, tracking it at scale, tracking AI responses can be inconsistent because the answers can change. But we do feel like tracking a small subset, a small sample of these is very useful. So I guess the action is, if you guys aren't considering tracking a few of these just yet, look into it. I'm not a salesman, so I'm not going to say you have to use DemandSphere, but definitely speak to your tools providers, and work out what the best solution is for your business. The fourth one, readiness action, is server log access, which is regular. So understanding bot behavior around information retrieval. I think server logs are one of those things that we like to talk a lot about in SEO, but the reality is that not everyone has their hands to them. Not everyone has access to it. It's not possible. But arguably in this new era of search, it might become more so important. Just to understand the kind of bot behavior. We started running a little bit of analysis for some of our clients as well. One of the surprising things that we've seen from that is that a large percentage of traffic from ChatGPT and known news agents is actually blocked, which doesn't make a lot of sense because there's no disallow in robots.txt. What we've seen is that there's often kind of that sensitivity around firewalls. Cloudflare and Akamai are often blocking these without our awareness. So I think understanding what the bots are crawling, whether or not they're getting that successful 200 status, whether or not their time now is becoming increasingly important. Whereas before, arguably server logs were a little bit of a luxury for most SEOs, in my opinion. Whereas now it feels like they were kind of a little bit more essential. So definitely start those conversations, get access to server logs sooner rather than later. There's a link at the bottom there to some of the more popular tools. So fifth and last one, which is, again, perhaps to quite a few people on this call. I know you guys are all SEO experts, of course. But yeah, like if you haven't set up Bing Webmaster Tools just yet, I definitely recommend getting involved and setting it up essentially, because it powers Copilot and ChatGPT to a certain extent with the answers and information from the database or the indexable database overall. It's really simple to do this if you haven't already. You can auto-verify from a Google account in a few clicks, which is a really cool feature. But yeah, it's just a really good practice to get access to if you haven't already, or a good reminder, shall we say, a bit of housekeeping. It's not as if you have to check this, as regularly perhaps as you use Search Console at this moment in time. But I think having access to this is super important. It allows us and our clients to feel like we are a little bit more prepared for the future of search. We understand the impacts and shift and changes in behavior between Bing and other search engines. So moving on to the crawling indexation section. So again, I said that's a 20% weighting. These are kind of like four, perhaps a little bit more balanced items that we've kind of come up with that we feel are super important. The idea is that some of these are actionable, some of these are strategic. We start with robots.txt, and we're not allowing bots in there. So, I mean, I always scratch my head with this one a little bit, to be honest, because obviously by default, the implication is that if you're not blocking something, it is crawlable. But we have found instances where if you haven't added an allow, then it has kind of created that kind of, I guess, that kind of disjointment between what's happening in robots.txt versus the firewall level. So in some instances, we have recommended adding sort of just a list of the 5 or 6 most common user agents to robots.txt and making sure that it's allowable or allowed to be crawled. Now, I don't know, it feels like it's kind of saying obvious because, again, the default position is that they are crawlable. But I think that from that readiness action, it is good to start those conversations with the sort of DevOps or sysadmin type team, see if you can get these included. Not all of them, of course, perhaps just test some of the most popular ones, work out what's been blocked and try and overcome the obstacle. Typically, it seems like most of these aren't blocked by robots. Perhaps it is more, as I said, the firewall level. But overall, like, it makes sense just to kind of, as a readiness action, just add them to the list and continue to monitor them going forward. Just a warning as well on this link to GitHub. So this is a list of compiled user agents for AI search, but don't blindly copy it because I think the default rule is a disallow. So it might cause you a few problems if you're not aware of that. So take the list of user agents, but just don't take the full rules when you copy and paste that in the future. The second readiness action in terms of the tech stuff here is just around confirming if pages can be found. So this is just an example of Copilot, and I guess there's a little bit of semantics in terms of how it works. But the challenge really is that we can ask any of these LLM search engines, directly. When's the last time you crawled this page, or when's the last time you accessed this page? What's the latest title tag for this page? There's different ways of asking it, but I guess the challenge really here is can we do that at scale? Now, there's a few tools that are out there, or they're kind of being built that can basically sort of take a lot of these queries and ask, multiple search engines and multiple searches. But yeah, overall, understanding this is super important. Just understanding. So if it's not indexable, then you want to run an indexability audit. Essentially, this example of Copilot. Number 8, so optimize internal links to content pillars. So internal links boost discovery and relevancy. So this is a link to SEMrush, obviously the sponsors of this SEO or host of this SEO Square event. Internal linking is really important for semantic association, content discovery, and it's very much an actionable tip there overall. It's a kind of strategic activity to support. Number 9, so implement best practice schema. This is something that's existed in a lot of our SEO roadmaps already, so it's quite well-known action. But I think the real call out here is that product schema is becoming even more important. As we've seen that there's more sort of shopping or shoppable search results surfaced across Google as well as ChatGPT, making sure you've got the right schema in place is becoming increasingly paramount. Now, I think there's a kind of a cautious approach between being proactive and automatically adding schema for any possible scenario. I mean, schema.org has hundreds of different types of schema versus sort of handpicking the elements that are actually used by Google for, from Search Console or Web Central sort of guidelines. But overall, focusing on product schema is definitely one of the things you guys want to get ahead of the curve with. If you haven't already used as much attributes as possible, product variations is one of the big ones we've explored recently, and for a few clients as well. Some of the discount scheme and loyalty scheme, which was released last week, was also super important. Moving on to UX and rendering. So again, 3 items here. JavaScript is probably the most important overall. This is a link to a tool by my colleague, John Hogg. It's basically a Chrome extension that allows you to view and compare a raw source or a rendered source. Most AI bots don't render JavaScript. I think the actual exception is Gemini, which is obviously powered by Google, but there's an interesting article by John Alderson that basically said the idea is that the new era of bots don't necessarily play by the same rules. Like everything about SEO was around optimizing for that client-side rendering. We'd expect it to happen. The kind of idea of 2 phases or 2 waves of indexation, which has been proved or disproved. The idea at the moment is that the bots of these new LLMs don't actually render stuff. They just get the raw source code. So it's a real kind of strategic initiative here in terms of improving that performance and identifying any bottlenecks for content retrieval. The next one item we've got, which I think is kind of an extension of JavaScript as well, it's kind of that performance. As part of the checklist, which again I'll share at the end of this talk, there is a lot of stuff around site speed, sort of perhaps Core Web Vitals. The Core Web Vitals are very much a Google-centric initiative. Like saying improve Core Web Vitals to improve LLM visibility is probably a little bit of a stretch because that is a Google-centric metric. But the idea of improving site performance or site speed, specifically initial response time, is something that's come up increasingly with a lot of our clients. I said, looking at some of the server logs, there's the idea of certain bots are timing out when it comes to fetching content. So I think there's going to be a renewed focus on that in the future, not just the sort of UX Core Vitals metrics that have introduced the last couple of years. And then we have accessibility as well, which is really useful. I don't want to do a disservice to the kind of whole field of accessibility. It's not my main area of expertise. But you can argue, certainly that bots are a type of user with potential kind of limitations, shall we say, in terms of how they access content. And the idea is, if you can provide better accessibility to humans, then obviously you provide better accessibility to bots as well. I think that the main one we've kind of worked on our clients so far is alt text, providing sort of more announced alt text to product variations to make sure that appears more, increase the likelihood that it will appear for Google Shopping, and then image search as well, which is obviously part of the kind of the multimodal experience we're seeing. Going to textual discovery as well, so calling some of these out. We talked about LMMs.txt. There's a link here if you guys want to create one, a one-off version of it, which works quite well. So feel free to action that if you think that's necessary, you want to do that test. The second one is Index Now protocol for Bing. So again, once you've got access to Bing, you can set this up. You can verify ownership via an API key. And there's a link to a tool there as well that will allow you to basically manually submit a list of URLs. It'll ping Bing, and then you'll be updated and allow the indexation to happen even quicker. So again, a real nice quick win if you guys haven't explored Index Now just yet. The main one that we've seen really in terms of this technical readiness, or what we refer to, is probably shopping feeds. Now, there's not like one main action here. I guess arguably doing a spot check and audit comparison between the data, which is in product schema and shopping feeds and then on page is super important. But I'd say the starting point is really find out who manages your shopping feeds. There's a lot of SEOs, a lot of people on our team as well, myself included, that don't actually speak to the team who manages these overall. And the link here or the screenshot is from an article or a news post by ChatGPT that says that they're actually going to allow feed submission in the future. So instead of fetching or crawling the web for products, there's an opportunity to directly feed them the products that your clients, your websites have, and then make sure they're included overall. So there's going to be a new era of kind of optimization for shopping feeds and bots. And if you don't understand where this source of information comes from, then obviously you can't optimize it. So it's just a call out to action that and start speaking to it. And a similar note as well to shopping feeds, we found across a lot of our clients, understanding local SEO, specifically consistency between business profiles and local pages, is super important overall. Again, the idea of spot checking, understanding, discrepancies between information, and making sure that sort of the NAP sort of style factors, the consistency creates more likelihood that it's going to be surfaced overall. So moving on to the penultimate section, content and authority. So again, that 20% weighting is arguably like my weakest areas, put together by the brilliant content team, Riona and co. But the first section really is to review on-page structure for best practices. So I appreciate a lot of you guys have probably already done this so far. You're constantly looking at page templates, trying to improve things. This is just a view of our sort of process that we call the perfect page. We're going to be updating these guidelines soon with the new era of search. There's a lot of idea or keywords around chunking, semantic relevancy, extraction, the rest of it. The idea is that content perhaps needs to be a little bit shorter, a little bit more sharp, a little more clarity behind each sentence, a little bit more certainty rather than using phrases like some might say. You might say like, it is known, a bit more certainty, a bit more factual elements. Obviously, it has implications across a lot of your money, your life, the industry, shall we say. Yeah, overall, reviewing on page for best practices is super important, especially as new ones emerge with that content retrieval. EAT factors are very important as well, which is why we always sort of, as a strategic item, we talk about doing an EAT audit for clients overall. Here's a link to Leila Salise's one that was shared a few years ago, which is a really good starting point. The idea is that obviously we are a Google-centric lens, so EAT is very much a Google kind of concept, but authority and understanding which pages are important is going to be relevant across all LMMs essentially. So that's kind of why we see that, again, ahead of understanding authority and kind of the overall value of content, it's super important, again, not just for Google, but for the new era of bots as well, which is why we recommend it. And then we talked about this at the beginning as well. So sort of the last readiness action, identify competitive gaps to be filled with digital PR. So I think that content already is king, but I think it's going to be even more important in the future as well, as we kind of need to feed or train this new era of bots, as we like to say at Dentsu internally. Rossen and Anna, my two colleagues, they've put together quite a few different prompts. The idea of prompt engineering, which is a bit of a kind of a meme in some circles, especially on LinkedIn. But the idea of prompt engineering asking ChatGPT is super useful overall. I certainly recommend in terms of understanding that perception, also maybe how you can improve things. And then last but not least, tracking brand sentiment and topical authority. This is something that is, again, super important to do to understand your perception from LLMs and the bots. I linked to a tool here from Dixon Jones, obviously the previous sort of founder of Majestic, Wayk.io. It's a really good tool. You can get a free sign up, find some information, and just start beginning to understand where your website, your brand sits compared to your competitors. Just to wrap up overall this talk, because I've just got reaching about 5 minutes left for a few questions. Again, I think the main takeaway for me really is that we're not in this new world just yet. There's still a lot of overlap between, I guess, kind of the old school, the old world in terms of traditional SEO best practices. Hopefully this deck has sort of outlined a few sort of really important things that we can still focus on, stuff that's relevant. For now, the message is very much keep calm and carry on in terms of what we're doing. I've summarized the quickest wins here as well. So this is the kind of items that we thought were quick in terms of, it could be actionable sooner. And this is the list of strategic initiatives. So again, please feel free to take away these slides after, refer to them, use them, get inspired by them, share them with me as well if you've got some new ideas. And then you can download a copy of the LMM Search Readiness Scorecard here. You can scan the QR code or just click this link to get that overall. So hopefully you guys find it super useful. And that's it from me. I just want to say thanks very much for having me and joining this call. Hope you enjoyed and got some good value out of this. If you've got any ideas to improve the LMM Readiness Scorecard, then feel free to connect with me. Send me an email to my Dentsu email or add me on LinkedIn. And yeah, I think we just got a few screenshots as well that the team have put in here of the LMS Readiness Scorecard. This is basically the list of checks we've got to go through here. And then this is the radar overall that you can take and access and share pretty much. I think that's it from me. I think Quinn's going to take over in terms of the hosting duties. Just want to say a massive thank you.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of questions for the Q&A if you've got a couple minutes just to finish up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it looks like the first one is, so will the difference in LLMs be where or how or where they get information, or eventually will all LLMs gather the same info from the same sources?
It's a really good question. I guess on one hand, that would make our lives a lot easier if it was gathered from one source. I think from the information sources, I feel like there's going to be a lot of overlap. I mean, there already is in terms of the indexes and the web. You've seen certain LLMs sign publishing deals with sort of different publications essentially to use that data. Like Reddit's obviously an example of that. So I guess there could be some exclusivity in certain sort of data sets. Like we've already seen some LLMs like Claude and Anthropic are being more sort of geared towards sort of, I guess, web developers and that sort of thing. So I think there'll be also that specialism, and perhaps when it comes to giving better answers, they need to train the data on different sources. So I guess broad search engines like Google, Bing, and Yandex, Naver, etc. I mean, maybe they'll use similar sources like the general web, shall we say? Whereas I think specialist LLMs will probably have to be trained specifically to give better answers. That's my layman answer, anyway.
Awesome. Got a couple more here.
Sure.
So Sarah asks, currently pulling this info in GA4 as referral data from LLMs, but how are you managing beyond that?
So we created a custom channel for that for a few clients, so grouping it together. So if you get a referral from this, that is a kind of, you can call the channel how you want, but yeah, like LMMs or AI traffic. Beyond that, as I said, there's a Looker Studio that we've created as well to isolate it. As I said, I think the problem really at the moment is that when you do compare LMM traffic, it's minuscule for most of our clients compared to traditional search. So it does create some really awkward looking QBR slides when we go through the performance. So our solution to that was just to create a separate report, a separate template, basically focused around clicks and then that monetary value. So I think as soon as you put in the sort of monetary value terms, obviously senior stakeholders understand it a little bit better. We had one client that I think had 100,000K sales or directly from ChatGPT. 100,000K is a lot of money to me, a lot of money to everyone on this call, I imagine. But if you look at the actual overall revenue of this particular client, it was like a complete drop in the ocean compared to the hundreds of millions they get for other channels. So it's all about that relativity and how you report it, I think, Sarah. That's probably my main takeaway for that.
Fair. I think we've got another minute for maybe one more question. So I'm going to go with one with the most upvotes here. Okay. So Zangeli asked, how to add information about your company to popular LLMs and into search LLMs?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I can't possibly give a great answer in 1 minute. I think the starting point for us really though was using the tool. So we're building a tool in-house in Dentsu to understand that, so Debut. But the way, I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, but the Dixon Jones's tool, the WayK, or whatever you want to say, is a really good starting point for that. Because if you add your brand or website to that and compare it with competitors, it'll basically, the idea of the tool is it will basically surface, what information the various LMMs know about you. And if you benchmark to a competitor, you can see gaps there. So there's quite a few common sources of data. I think like in terms of citations, Wikipedia comes up quite a lot, as does Reddit and I think a few others. I think the idea really in terms of our action is to understand the citations are most likely for your brand and kind of wherever they come from, make sure you're included in that. So it's kind of what it work. It's difficult to be proactive. Basically, you need to be where it's been surfaced essentially. So I think using that kind of discoverability tools is the first starting point, and sort of action in some of your kind of other initiatives. It could be digital PR, it could be content, trying to feed those sort of content and reference or citation gaps is probably the best way forward. Along with that sort of Wikipedia, Wikidata type trusted sources of authority that seem to span a lot of LMMs really.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for answering those rapid fire questions, complex questions as quickly and as efficiently as you could. Thank you for coming on. It's super useful, very practical. I think some practical takeaways for everybody that's listening. So thank you very much, Nick, and enjoy your time in Colombia.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And everybody else, the replay, like we said, will be emailed to you in a few days, so next week. And as our moderators have said as well, the video itself and then also the slides will be available on the SEO Square website next week too. Let me get out of here. And as always, please take a minute to scan the QR code if you have been here for many of the sessions or